We have been in this series called Jesus, the One and Only, for 12 weeks. I can't believe it's already been 12 weeks into 2025. So wild, it's going so fast. We have 4 more weeks in this series. It's taken us all the way through Easter. It's been so great. We have just been looking at the life of Jesus together, things that he said, right? Things that he did, different miracles that he performed. Today, we are going to be looking at an encounter that Jesus had with someone. It's a conversation, and this is actually the longest one-on-one conversation that Jesus had that we have recorded in the Bible. I'm calling today's message an epic encounter of biblical proportions. Lots of words. Preparing for today's message, I started thinking about all the encounters that I've had in my life, all the epic encounters, right? And we've all had these run-ins with people or whatever, these meetings with people that leave a mark on us. Encounters that we remember for the rest of our lives. And I don't know why the first ones that come to mind for me personally are the times that I have ran into celebrities, right? And I don't know if you remember this, if you've been in Jacksonville for a while, 2005, Jacksonville hosted the Super Bowl. It was an exciting time. I was in college at the time and I actually worked in valet parking. So I would park cars for people and we worked a bunch of private parties. I got to meet a lot of NFL players. I met some movie celebrities and TV people like Rob Schneider and Nick Lachey. And come on, if you're under 25, I promise those were real celebrities 25 years ago. When I was a teenager, I was in Busch Gardens and we're standing in line waiting for some food. And right in front of us, I realized is standing Eddie Guerrero, who was one of my favorite wrestlers back then. He was so short. I couldn't believe it, right? Just a few years ago, my wife and I were at a hotel in Fernandina, and we ran into Jeff Foxworthy, Mr. You Might Be a Redneck. But the most epic encounter I ever had with a celebrity happened when I was 5 years old. And I got to meet a hero of mine. This is someone that I watched on TV so much. I knew every single detail about this person, and I still cannot believe I got to meet him. But he was in town at a convention, and so my dad took my brother and I to meet him. And we stood in this really, really long line, as far as I can remember. Took forever, but we finally got to the front. We got to take pictures with him. He signed some autographs. I got him to sign this poster that I had, and that hung up in my room for longer than I want to admit this morning. But thank you, Mom. She kept pictures. She keeps pictures from everything, but she kept a picture for us. This is when me and my brother met He-Man. And that's my brother. That's me. Looking back, I'm not sure we actually met the real He-Man, Like, who are you fooling with that mask? It's a terrible costume. But as ridiculous as this was, this encounter left a mark on my life. It has been almost 40 years since this, and I still remember it. But it didn't change my life. The encounter that we're going to look at today changed somebody's life. Because that's what happens when you encounter Jesus. And we've already seen this in this series that we've been in. When people encounter Jesus, their lives are changed. And so, this when Jesus was on earth, people started to realize this, and so they would do everything they could to get near him. We talked before about how people ripped through the roof so they could get their friend near Jesus because he needed to be healed, right? People have been screaming at the top of their lungs, disrupting everything just so Jesus would hear them and come near. They would push through crowds. They would do anything they could to be near him because when you encounter Jesus, your life is changed. But the story we're looking at today is different because this story is all about Jesus doing everything he can to get near someone. So that he initiates this encounter we're going to look at. John chapter 4 today, story of the woman at the well. A lot of us have heard this story before, but I'm going to challenge us this morning to see it with some fresh eyes. And I really want us to put ourselves in this story. I don't know if you realize that, but the reason we say it's the story of the woman at the well is because we don't know her name. When John was recording this story, for some reason, he left this woman unnamed. And I think it was on purpose. I think the reason was that to help us put ourselves in her shoes. So that's what we're going to do this morning. We're going to see ourselves in this story of the woman at the well because I believe Jesus wants to have an encounter with all of us today, just like the encounter we're about to read about. So here we go. John chapter 4, verse 1. Now Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that he was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John, although in fact it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. A little bit of drama going on. Jesus doesn't do drama. So he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Let's keep reading. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, which actually means city of drunkards. This is John letting us know this story takes place on the west side of Samaria, right? It was near the plot of ground Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about noon. Let's keep reading. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" His disciples had gone into the town to buy food, so Jesus is all alone with this woman. Keep reading. Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. All right, here's the deal. John is a really, really good storyteller. And this is a really, really good story that he has set up for us. But the problem is we're a couple thousand years removed from when this happened. So there are some hints, some clues he's dropping that this encounter is really epic, but we might miss them because we're not in the same context. So I want to talk about 3 important details that we got to understand this morning. First detail, this woman is a Samaritan. So John says that Jesus has been doing ministry in Judea. He's been healing people, but he's time for him to leave, so he is going home to Galilee. And John says Jesus had to go through Samaria, which actually is not true. In fact, most people going from Judea to Galilee, most Jews would go around Samaria to make that journey. So the fact that John is telling us this, the fact that John says Jesus had to go, lets us know that something important is happening here. And if Jesus had to go to Samaria, it's not because of geography, right? It's because of this encounter. If you and I were going to make this journey from Judea to Galilee, the shortest route is directly through Samaria. It's about 70 miles. Flights were really expensive back then, so we would have been walking. Right? And 70 miles was about a 3-day journey. But if you were like a good, religious, God-fearing Jew, you would actually have went around Samaria and turned that 3-day walk into a 6-day walk. Why? Because they hated each other. And in my opinion, you have to really hate somebody to turn a 3-day walk into a 6-day walk, right? And this hatred that they had for each other, it was cultural, it was ethnic, and it was religious, all rolled into one, right? And this hatred had been going on for hundreds of years. You can read in the Old Testament, the kingdom of Israel, at one point, there was some fighting among kings, and it actually split into 2 different kingdoms. There was a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. Southern kingdom was where the Jewish people lived. Northern kingdom became known as Samaria. So they were Jewish, but they were Samaritans now. They changed their name. And at some point in their history, the Assyrian nation, the Assyrians had come and conquered them. So there's a lot of history, bear with me. And the Assyrians were ruthless, right? And they had a strategy that they always used when they conquered a nation. And so they came in Samaria, and they took all the healthy people, all the wealthy people, all the people that they would say were important, and they took them out of Samaria and scattered them throughout the rest of Assyria. They left behind the poor, the sick, the discarded, the unimportant, right, in their eyes. And then what they would do, when it was just those people left, so in Samaria just the poor and the sick are left, the Assyrians would actually bring in other foreigners from places they had conquered. And they would force them to marry each other. And so what you would get is this mix of customs, this mix of ethnicities, right? Even a mix of religions. And so the people from the southern kingdom of Israel, the Jewish people now, like they looked at Samaritans as compromised religiously, ethnically, and culturally. And the differences between them now led to this hatred that was so intense, so crazy. A Jewish rabbi said this back then: "Let no man eat the bread of Samaritans, for he who eats their bread is as he who eats swine's flesh," which for the first century was a pretty sick burn, okay? We got to understand this. It's a big deal. So when Jesus comes to this woman, this Samaritan woman, and asks her for a drink, it is a huge deal. This is why she is stunned. How can you, Jesus, a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan, for a drink? Because here's the deal. It's her. She's going to be drawing the water, right? She's going to be touching the jar, the cup that Jesus is going to now take, and he is going to have to touch his hands to the same jar that she touched. Big no-no for a Jewish rabbi. Not only that, it's her cup. So she has drank from this cup. So not only is he touching his hands, he will be touching his lips to this jar that this Samaritan woman's lips have touched. Big no-no. This would have been crazy for a Jewish rabbi to do, but don't you know Jesus does crazy things? And he is jumping over the highest cultural, ethnic, and religious walls talking to this Samaritan. Detail number 2 that you got to know. This Samaritan is a woman. And it is a really, really big deal that Jesus is having a one-on-one conversation with a woman in the first century. Women at that time were not treated well, and that is a huge understatement. They were considered basically second-class humans, and they were given a status in the world like just slightly above the status of property. Just a couple examples. One of the rabbis in that time said that rabbis taught that men who wanted to be righteous, men who wanted to be holy, were to never greet a woman in public. Crazy. An author around this time an author from the first century wrote, it is like better is the wickedness of a man than the goodness of a woman. Like crazy. It would not have been weird and uncommon to hear a Jewish man pray, "O Lord, I thank thee that thou hast not made me a Gentile, a sinner, a tax collector, or a woman." Jesus doesn't play by these rules, right? He never treated women as second-class humans. Hey, he doesn't treat anyone as second-class humans, in case you didn't know that. And he is just sitting here on the edge of this well, having a conversation one-on-one with this woman. It would have been so revolutionary in his time to be doing this. And Jesus always did this. Throughout his time on earth, he always treated women as fully human. So Jesus is here talking with this Samaritan woman. He's jumping over racial walls, ethnic walls, cultural walls, societal walls, right? Religious walls, all the walls to have this conversation that he had to go to Samaria to have. But the third detail is going to blow your mind. If you were reading this in the first century, you would have been pretty mad he's talking with a Samaritan. You would have been upset that he's having a one-on-one conversation with a woman. But this third detail would have made you lose your mind. I'm not sure you can handle this. Are you ready? Detail number 3, this story takes place at a well. Shocking, right? It actually is a big deal, and wells have a ton of significance in the Bible, and whenever you're reading a story about a well in the Bible, it usually follows a certain pattern. There's a certain formula that well stories follow. How many of you love a good romantic comedy? Anyone? You just love a good rom-com. My wife hates them, so I have to watch them in secret, right? And just kidding. We actually both hate them, which probably says something about our marriage. But in a rom-com, there's typically a scene known as a meet cute. Have you heard this term before? A meet cute is when the romantic heroes of the story have their first interaction. It's the first time they meet in a cute way, right? And it's usually magical, but it's also down to earth and relatable, you know. It's zany, but it's also sweet. My favorite meet cute in a movie is from the movie Up. Do y'all remember this? This is Carl and Ellie. Their meet cute takes place in this abandoned house. All right, and Carl's walking around, and Ellie accidentally scares him, and Carl loses his balloon. They have to go up to the roof to try to get it. Carl ends up falling through the ceiling, breaking his arm, goes to the hospital, and it is the greatest and saddest love story ever told in 5 minutes that you will ever see. I love it. Well stories in the Bible are meet cutes. And when you read a story about a well, something big is happening. Moses met his wife at a well. Abraham sent out his servant to find a wife for his son Isaac. Where did he find her? A well. My favorite one is Jacob and Rachel. Oh man, their story is so cool. Jacob's out and comes across a well, and Rachel's there and has brought her sheep for water. but there's a problem. She can't get water because there's this huge stone blocking the well. But Jacob's already in love because Rachel's beautiful and he's smitten. He's like, I ain't going to let this rock stop her from getting water. And it should have taken many men to move this, but he does it by himself. And Rachel was so impressed. It says they kiss each other and Jacob just starts to weep. And it is one heck of a meet cute. Single people in the house, you need to find yourself a well. Here's the idea that we find in the Bible. Where wells are where good men find worthy women to join them in God's story. And here's what's so crazy. If you're reading this story that John has set up, when you realize where this story is taking place, you are cringing. Oh no, Jesus, no, not her. She's not worthy. Wells are where destinies are changed. Don't you know she's a Samaritan woman? What is happening? Wells are stories are love stories. Jesus, you can't possibly love this Samaritan woman. Now we can keep reading. We know what's actually going on in this story. Verse 9. We'll read this one again. The Samaritan woman said to him, you are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans. Verse 10. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Jesus has just raised the stakes of this conversation. She doesn't know what he's talking about yet, though. She probably thinks he's trying to flirt with her, right? Next verse. Sir, the woman said, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his sons and his livestock? She's not getting it. Jesus is about to get real direct. He answered, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. I love her response. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water. Jesus has just offered her, something so much better, something so much greater than what she has come there for today. Verse 6, it had mentioned that this is all happening at noon, right? The hottest part of the day. The sun's at its highest point. So this would have been pretty unusual. Usually you would go out to draw water at the coolest part of the day. And it was really hard work and would take a long time. So what was most common was all the women of the town would actually go out together, either in the early morning or late at night after the sun has gone down. Because it took a while and they wanted to hang out, but also it was hot. It was hard work. But this woman is all alone, and she is out here at the worst time of day. And what we are about to find out in this story, that she is ashamed of some things. And she has some areas of pain in her life that are making her avoid others. And you can hear the pain in her voice when she says to Jesus, give me this water so I don't have to keep coming out here by myself with my shame, right? And Jesus knows that the well can't give her what she actually needs. Because she needs something that's going to take away her shame, right? Something that's going to take away her pain. And Jesus knows what she needs. And here's the deal. He knows what all of us need this morning. Come on, let's see ourselves in this story. Jesus knows what you're really looking for. There are so many ways that we try to quench like the thirst of our souls through this world. So many ways, but every single one of them leaves us looking for more. And we buy into the lies of the world, that it's money, sex, power, entertainment, whatever that is going to satisfy us, but that never satisfies us. Even the good things in this world, even the best things are temporary satisfaction, right? I love hanging out with my friends. It fills up my soul. But I'm going to need to hang out with them again soon, right? in order to keep meeting that need of friendship in my life. I love a good vacation. Anyone else love a good vacation? Yeah, my kids were on spring break this past week. I was on vacation 3 days this week. You know what I already need? Another vacation, right? And all these things, they are so temporary and only satisfy us for a little bit. Jeremiah 2:13 says this, my people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own wells, broken wells that cannot hold water. This verse is talking about idolatry. And idolatry is when you go to anything that is temporary and ask it to meet an eternal need. It's when you go to something that is limited and you try to get it to be ultimate in your life. But Jesus knows what we're really looking for. He knows there is only one source that is ultimate. And he is saying to all of us today, hey, I know what you need. I know what you're really looking for, and I am offering it to you today. Come on, we got to see ourselves in this story. Let's keep reading verse 16. Jesus said to her, go, call your husband and come back. Uh-oh. I have no husband, she replied. Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. Keep reading. The fact is, you have had 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true. Sir, the woman said, I can see that you are a gossip. She didn't say that. She said, I can see that you are a prophet. Why? Because he has just identified her source of shame. He has just identified and brought up the reason she is out here all by herself. And here's where we got to really work hard this morning to see and to hear this story with some fresh eyes and ears. I don't know about you. I grew up hearing this as a story about an adulterous and sinful woman. But Jesus doesn't use those words. He never says adultery. He never even says sin, right? And we know Jesus, like he was full of grace, but he was also full of truth. He had no problem looking people in the eye saying, hey, I love you. You got to stop doing that. I love you. I'm for you. Come on, stop sinning. He had no problem saying that all throughout the Bible, but to this woman, he doesn't say that. And we hear 5 husbands, and we immediately start to make these assumptions about her, right? But Jesus doesn't do that. All he is doing is naming her situation. I've already talked about how it's so hard to be a woman in the first century. That was especially true when it came to divorce. It was almost, if not virtually, impossible for a Jewish woman to divorce a man. But the flip side is the opposite. It was so easy for a Jewish man to divorce a woman. Rabbis even taught at that time, so this is church leaders, like in that time, religious leaders even taught that the husbands, they were free to divorce their wives just for the fact that they burnt their dinner. Some of our marriages wouldn't have survived back then, right? But so we hear this story, and if this is how it was in the first century, when we hear 5 women, our first thought shouldn't be, ooh, what a terrible woman. Our first thought should be, oh, what a poor woman. Who used you? Who discarded you? Like, who did this to you? Divorce would have been the main reason she had 5 husbands, but the next most likely reason would have been that Jewish law said that if your husband died, it was the responsibility of his next of kin, so his brother or his cousin, to marry the widow and take care of her. So maybe this woman has just been through 5 terrible tragedies, and the 6th guy now is like, hey, I will take care of you, but it doesn't work out too well to be called your husband, so you're just going to live with me and we're not going to get married. We don't know. But it's either tragedy or trauma in her life, or both. And so Jesus brings this up, and he doesn't mention sin. All he does is name her situation. He's not doing it to shame her, right? The reason he is doing it is he wants her to know that he knows who she is. He wants her to know she doesn't have to be in denial about her situation. She doesn't have to try to hide her shame. Jesus sees her, the real her, not the her that she just wishes and hopes other people would see. He sees the real her. And come on, let's put ourselves in the story. Jesus knows who you are. He sees you. That's the point today. Jesus sees you, the real you, and it is the real you that he is offering living water to today. Jesus, God is not surprised by your story. He knows. And we have this tendency, we all have this tendency to try to hide the real us. This is especially true like on social media. All right, we post the headlines and the highlights of our lives, and we try to create this perfect picture. But come on, we all know it's not real. You're not fooling anybody with that mask, He-Man, right? It's a terrible costume. We all know it's a mask because we all have one just like it, but it's real. The fear is real because we know people can't handle us. They can't handle seeing us because they can't see past the worst of our lives. They can't see past our shame. But Jesus sees past your shame, and he's not holding it against you. He is like a light, right? He is the light of the world, and he wants to come in and shine his light on those sources of shame and pain, not to expose us, not to make us afraid, not to bring more shame into our life. He wants to shine his light to heal and to make whole. Come on, we got to see ourselves in this story this morning. John 4, verse 20. The woman says this, our ancestors worshiped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. She's changing the subject. What's going on? Maybe she's uncomfortable. Maybe she don't want to talk about what's going on in her life. Maybe she realizes, this is a prophet. This is a holy moment, and she's got worship on the mind. And so she's asking a legitimate question. Hey, Samaritans say worship happens on this mountain. Jewish people say worship happens in a temple in Jerusalem. Which one is it? And the sad thing is, because of her past, she would not have been welcome to worship in either spot, right? Jesus is about to give her really, really good news. Verse 21. Woman, Jesus replied, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you don't know. We Jewish people worship what we do know. So for salvation is from the Jews. Let's keep reading. Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. When Pastor Adam initially asked me to preach on the woman at the well, I intended to just teach on these 4 verses because there is so much goodness in them. But man, when I was reading the rest of the story, I was like, no, I got to teach the whole story. So I don't have time to unpack this, but just know this. Jesus is once again blowing through some walls of tradition and religion, and he is letting her know the way that you have known forever, the way that you relate to God is about to change because of me. Thank you, Jesus. Let's keep reading. Verse 25. The woman said, I know that Messiah called Christ is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything to us. He's saying, oh, I know what you're talking about. I've heard about the Messiah who's going to come to save us one day. We're all waiting for him. This is the whole point of this conversation. This is why Jesus had to go to Samaria to say these words. Jesus declared, I, the one speaking to you, I am he. I love this. The book of John. Book of John has these 7 what are known as the I am statements, like really famous statements that Jesus made. I'm the bread of life, right? I am the light of the world. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And whenever he made these I am statements, he was kind of revealing that he wasn't just a man. He was revealing that he was God dressed in human form, right? But before he made any of those statements, he revealed himself to this woman. Jesus was normally super secretive about his identity. People would ask him all the time, like, who are you? How are you doing this? Like, are you from God? Are you from the devil? And Jesus was always like secretive about it, when it would be like, well, you see, there was this man and he had a horse, and they would be like, what are you talking about, Jesus? Even in John chapter 3, the chapter right before this one, there's a man named Nicodemus who comes to Jesus. And Nicodemus says highly respected. He's a religious teacher, and he has some questions about the kingdom of God, and he's asking these questions. And Jesus just starts saying, kind of crazy things like, hey, you know what the kingdom of God's like? It's like being born a second time. Or it's like the wind, and how you don't really know where the wind's going to go. You don't know what makes it go or where it's going. And Nicodemus is so confused. But I love in this story, like to this Samaritan woman who hasn't even asked the question, Jesus just flat out reveals who he is to this man and this woman. And is unloved, right? She is on the outskirts of society, the fringe of society. She's from a hated people group. And Jesus is just revealing his identity to her. And as far as we can tell in the Bible, this is the first time he ever did that. And it would be years before he did it as directly as this. Again, it is mind-blowing. Why is he doing this? Because he wants this woman to see him. And come on, let's put ourselves in this story. Jesus wants you to see him. He wants you to know he sees you this morning, but he also wants you to see him. Why? Because when we see Jesus, we are changed. I love, 2 Corinthians says, like, when we look at Jesus, it's like going from glory to greater glory, to more glory, infinitely going to more glory and more glory. When we see Jesus, when we look at him, we are transformed into his image and become something new. He wants you to see him this morning and be changed. So come on, let's see ourselves in the story. Just a couple more verses. Verse 27. Just then his disciples returned, and they were surprised to find him talking with a woman. But no one asked, what do you want? Or why are you talking with her? They just stood there, right, with their mouths open because they were dumbfounded and shocked that Jesus was talking to this woman. Doesn't say that, but that's what's happening. Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to the town and said to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah? And they came out of the town and made their way toward him. And verse 39 says this, many of the Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. He told me everything I ever did. I don't know if you realize this. I love that this story ends, and as far as we can tell, no one ever drew any water. Jesus is still thirsty, right? And this woman now, it says, abandoned her jar. She just left it, has forgotten all about it, and she has ran back into town and is telling everyone, hey, you got to come meet this guy that just met me, right? And it's crazy because she has been avoiding these people. This is the whole reason she is out here alone to have this encounter with Jesus. And now she is going back to those same people, telling them, hey, this guy knows everything I did. Y'all ought to come hear him talk about it. Maybe he'll do the same thing for you, right? It is crazy. So what's going on? Her story is no longer a source of shame, right? She has seen and met someone who can see her and not hold her past against her. She has found what she was looking for, and she knows that this is exactly what everyone else is looking for. Here you go. When you see how Jesus sees you, you want others to see Jesus too. The way we say it at Rise Church, found people, find people. The way this woman would probably say it, seen people, see people, right? When you come face to face with Jesus, you want everyone else to see him too. I don't know if you know this. Do you know where you can get the best steak tacos in Jacksonville? There are many people in this room right now that know the correct answer is Iguana on Park. And do you know how they know that's the correct answer? It's because I talk about those steak tacos all the time. It's because I have tasted and I have seen that their steak tacos are good. One of my favorite verses in the Bible, Psalm 34:8. Taste and see that the Lord is good. I'm telling you, when you taste that living water, when you see Jesus and you look into his eyes and realize he sees you, he really sees you. Not only does it change your life, you can't help but tell everyone else how good he is. We believe this, that Jesus changes destinies. Rise Church exists because we believe Jesus changes everything still today, right? We're not here, trust me, I don't have time just to go through the motions. I'm not here doing cutesy, religious stuff. These aren't just simple songs we're singing. I am here because I have encountered Jesus. This is why we are here. This is why all our dream team is serving this morning. We have encountered Jesus. We have found what we're looking for, and we know that everyone else is looking for the same thing. Come on, we were all created. We were all created in such a way that Jesus is the only thing that can satisfy the thirst of our hearts, the thirst of our souls. So come on, I just invite you to stand with me this morning. Our worship team is up here. Our prayer team is going to come down front. And we're going to pray for a few things this morning. I just invite you to come. If you're here today and you've been hearing that voice of the devil telling you that you can't bring your shame to Jesus, you can. You may think you're unworthy this morning. Jesus doesn't. You may think your shame is too great for him to handle. It's not. And he is offering living water to you today. So I just invite you to come encounter him this morning. Come on, come pray with our prayer team. Maybe you're in here today and you've encountered Jesus and it just feels like it's been a long time. And you want to encounter him again today. You want to experience his grace. You want to feel him seeing you. You want to see him. Come on, I just invite you to come pray with our prayer team this morning. Or maybe, come on, this is who I'm praying for. Maybe you have never encountered Jesus. Listen to me. Today is the day. You can encounter him today, just like the Samaritan woman, just like I have. You can encounter Jesus today.